In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am super excited to introduce today's guest. He's smart, successful, humble, and an all-around great guy. Under his leadership, his company has flourished, and they bring clients integrated solutions to solve their most critical IT and business needs, always with a security-first mindset. Prior to his current role, he spent 13 years at a global commerce platform in a range of leadership roles, including leading their CRM practice, managing the project management office, and leading software development for the Americas. He's an outdoor enthusiast and loves coaching his kids' sports teams. He is president and CEO at Systems Engineering. Matt McGrath.
Natalie, thanks very much for having me. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Matt, to kick off our conversation, I wanted to start by asking, what do you think is the biggest misconception out there about successfully driving change in an organization?
That's a great question. It's something you and I have talked a little bit about in the past, just kind of informally. And, from where I sit, it's one of the most, I'd say, interesting and challenging parts of roles like maybe you and I have. I think when I first watched leaders in communicating change, I think I really sort of underestimated the challenge and how big of a challenge it is to do that well. As I started to become kind of more responsible for it myself and had some misstarts, I would say, around some change management, the communication around it, I started to learn really quickly. First of all, I just started to educate myself, like what is this science around change management, and started to really appreciate the fact that there is a science around it. And then I think the more I did it, started to really also realize that it is as much art as it is science. It's a huge test, I think, for leaders. At least that's been my experience. It really, from what I've seen, it just forces you to be so comprehensive in the communication and in the effort and kind of relentless around the change. You got to hit every single layer of the organization, and you got to be repetitive. Certainly something I've seen is, it challenges or shows you how much trust you maybe have within your organization. That's something I think I maybe underestimated in the beginning around driving change, is that it really does test your level of trust within the organization. What do people really think of you? Are they going to follow you down this path? How do you continue to be compelling and consistent? So I don't have a great answer, other than I think for me, it's been a lot about educating myself and then applying that and realizing that every organization is probably different. Every leader is probably different, but certainly that kind of relentlessness and the comprehensiveness around the communication and the consistency and then really being there with the people as they're going through the change, I think is a big deal. And that's, to me, again, where the trust kind of comes in. You start to really, I think you learn a lot about the relationship you really have with your organization or with your employees when you go through these things. And it's certainly an opportunity to sharpen some of those things, I think, if they need to be. But yeah, it's a fascinating topic. I think every organization is on its own sort of journey in that way. And certainly every leader as well is on a different journey there. Really, really an interesting topic. I think you and I both have seen a lot of change in our own businesses and talked about this. But it's also an area I'd say where I really look for feedback from other people who have tried to do this and really try to learn from other people as well. But it's a huge part of all of our jobs. And I wish I had a better answer for you in terms of exactly how to drive change, but I think it's a little bit gut instinct, and it's a fair amount of education as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's very, very well said. And I think you touched on a lot of important topics, right? Between the trust, the communication, the consistency. So I'd love to unpack those a bit more. And I think the way you phrased it, as you were just getting started in the process, wanting to understand the science, but then realizing in reality there is both art and science to that. I'm curious, as you were starting to educate yourself, where do you go for that kind of information? What's been helpful to you over the years?
Yeah, that's great. It's a good question. So, I'm a huge consumer of podcasts and like sort of bite-size information. And these days, that's a great way to consume information. There are tons of great resources. One that's really always been for me is somebody who can kind of bring clarity to a situation. Certainly, Simon Sinek is someone who kind of really helps you reground pretty quickly and get you back to the basics, I would say. And he's someone who's both in the written form and in his kind of electronic delivery of his information. I find him to be pretty helpful. I think it's also true that, when you expose yourself to some of the big thinkers in the world who maybe spend less time deliberating how to drive change and they just drive change, it's to me a really interesting counterpoint that to incorporate into your thinking and to remind yourself that there's a certain level of aggressiveness also that really does need to underlie some of the change. It can't be change at such a slow pace that it doesn't feel like it's actually happening. So for me, it's really healthy also to listen to, a lot of the big sort of tech minds of the day today who are really just kind of breaking frontiers and who are really just doing the things that they think need to be done. And so I really try to balance all those sources, to be honest with you. I think it's helpful to listen to people you don't agree with and to hear what they're doing and to also find people who are maybe more aligned with your cultural approach, see what they're doing. But for me, I'm kind of a sponge of a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different inputs. I really try to look for some guiding voices out there. And then at the end of the day, you got to be yourself and you got to apply it in your own way. But it's certainly helpful to see other people's styles and other people's approaches.
I think you're spot on there. I'm similar in that way, where I love podcasts, love consuming content in general, and I think we are living in times of change. So whether it's kind of just keeping pace with the day to day of a business, or working through kind of bigger changes and transformations, as we'll be talking about more, I think getting information from different sources out there, and then figuring out, right, how does that apply to your own environment, as well as for myself at least, how do I make that authentic to my leadership style, right? So someone
Right.
could have great advice and give some frameworks and systems that have worked elsewhere, but how do I make that my own?
That's right. And that's the huge challenge, right? Because you're back to sort of that trust issue, I think. If you can't make it your own, if it's not authentic, people are going to sniff that out immediately, basically. And that's, I think you got to be really mindful of that.
Matt, I'd love to talk a little bit about change that you've driven in your organization. Can you tell me perhaps what is the biggest change you've driven?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, the first thing that it might be useful for people to know, we're a 36-year-old company. And like any long tenured company, there are great things that come along with that. And there are some other things that come along with it too that can make change challenging. We really cut our teeth as a value added reseller of VAR, which a lot of people maybe listening here are familiar with. And like a lot of companies in our industry in the last 15 years or so, we've really been faced with that question of, do we want to convert from being really a VAR to a managed service provider? And so something that we really considered for a long time, and then eventually really dove in on that change about 3.5, 4 years ago. And, so for us, that had all the big elements of change. It was cultural. It was an identity question for a lot of people who had really come to systems engineering to become a very senior engineer and to really learn and to kind of raise the ceiling on what was possible in their engineering career. And that conversion from being a VAR and being an engineer in a VAR to being really a managed service provider that is embedded within organizations. It's really about how well can we partner with and serve our clients on a lot of different levels. Yeah, that was a huge change for us and for any company like us going through that kind of change. And it's been very challenging for a lot of our peers as well, and something we're pretty proud of. But it took a long time, and it took It was a lot harder, and it turned out to be the things that were successful were different than what I thought they would be going into it. But one of the biggest things that I felt like was really front and center for us was to work through some of the identity pieces for people whose career had really been shaped by this goal to become the best they possibly could be in the engineering side. And what we're saying now is, yes, absolutely, we need to be the best engineers, and we also need to be the best around customer service and consultancy and guidance and partnership. When you're a managed service provider, you are part of your client's company. You have to really think that way. We're supporting end users now instead of really just working directly with IT directors and managing, server rooms and working on that end of it. So yes, we're still doing all of the very high end engineering stuff, but we're also super integrated into our clients, and the way that we kind of partner through every level of the organization suddenly became really, really important. So that's a huge change for us, and it's something that has taken us a long time to, I think, get to. But as I look around the organization now and I see how we measure ourselves, our KPIs, the conversations we're having, they're all super grounded in how is this partnership going? What's the health of the partnership? Are we delivering the kind of value for money that we should be delivering? How would we judge ourselves as a partner is a big thing we ask ourselves a lot. And again, when you're being graded on 200 interactions across the entire organization over the course of a week versus maybe one or two with one or two different people in an organization, and that's the difference between a managed service provider and a VAR on a lot of levels, everything changes, and how you're evaluated changes. And what I'm most proud of, I would say, is that we've really been able to keep our client base and our employee base intact through this transition. And now we sit here and we've completely reversed the kind of the ratio of revenue from one-time, product purchases and product to the recurring revenue side. So completely flipped that over the course of about 4 years, and really feel like we've evolved our relationships and deepened our relationships with our clients and our employees at the same time. So that's really been the biggest change since I've been here. It's challenged us on that core level of kind of who are we? What are we here to do as an organization? We're able to come out, really by clinging to our culture and our values, we're able to come out the other side in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I know from experience with other companies as well, just what a big transition that is. And as you say, right, different skill sets, different mindset, different team structure in some cases. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what led you to it in the first place, like how you made that decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for us, we're 100% employee owned. Also, something worth knowing about us, and part of the model there that we've embraced very early on in this journey was really to try to create this infinite company. And that's not my idea. That's one that we sort of got and really thought it applied to us. But this idea that we're going to make decisions that are in the best interest in the long term of this organization. So with an employee owned company, one of the things that's true is that you really want to be building sort of consistently and incrementally building value in the company so that all of the employee owners get some financial upside as part of that growth. But underpinning that is the requirement that you stay in business, that you're relevant, and that you're able to thrive and grow. And so we're a very growth-oriented company. We have been from the beginning. And so, for us, I think that knowing that we really wanted to be here for a long time, and we were looking at the VAR industry and saying, we're not convinced that that model is going to persist and allow us to grow to where we want to grow. And so really, it was just one of those moments where we thought, enough is changing right now, and we have this opportunity. We really love our client base. We love where we work. We think we have the talent and the commitment within the organization to make this transition. And that's really what ultimately where we got the confidence was. We looked at the people, we looked at the book of business, we said, we can do this. And the time was right. And it turns out that it was. And so really fortunate on a lot of levels there. But certainly one that we're glad, it's a transition we're certainly glad to be on the other side of, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of moving pieces that need to come together in the right way. And as you were talking about earlier, being aggressive enough, right? So bringing the team along for the journey, which sometimes requires a slower
Yeah.
pace, but then pushing kind of fast and forward at a pace that can keep it moving, keep the momentum going, etc.
Yeah, one of the things I'll just say that I learned in the company that I was at prior to systems engineering is, when you, and leaders understand this, but for me, it took a little while, which is when you suspect and then know something needs to happen, a change, whether it's with personnel or business direction, those are the moments to just get your courage up and get it done. And I think if something lives long enough in that category for you of, yeah, I really got to do that. That's the right thing to do. And again, whether that's personnel or whether that's business decisions, I just feel like you got to listen to yourself at some point. We reached that tipping point where we thought, we've been here long enough. We know what the right thing to do is. But I just like that because it applies to so many different parts of our kind of thinking in these roles is when something's in that category long enough, you can't ignore it. You gotta go get it. And, yeah, that's part of where the courage comes in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I might butcher the quote here, but I love the quote that courage is in the absence is not the absence of fear; it's moving forward in the face of fear. And I think that speaks, very clearly to the kind of change that you're talking about. And there's the organizational courage that's needed, and then of course there's the courage as a leader.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to come back to something you had mentioned about culture and how important that's been for you through the process. Can you talk about, I guess, the role that that's played, but maybe even more so, was it the culture that you already had in the organization coming into this transformation, or were there things that you kind of changed or evolved kind of through the process?
That's a good question. I think in any time like this, you leverage the things that really suit the change you're trying to make. I think you got to be sort of clear eyed about what are the things that you also need to kind of shed. And, I would say the thing that as I sit here today, that I'm kind of most proud of around the things that we now have as part of our culture, or that are more clearly identifiable as part of our culture now than they were 3-4 years ago, which is really that a willingness to embrace change and to kind of have the fundamental mindset that the world around us, technology, business, it is evolving so quickly that we have to be in a mode of being prepared for change, assuming that change is coming at us at all times. We have to be looking at all of our products, all of our services, our skill sets, and really be change ready on all fronts. And so for me, it was really about this really strong culture of commitment that we already had here and that we're fortunate to have built over time, which can be a trait of an ESOP, and really leverage that level of commitment that people had to the business and to our clients. And then try to bring in some new things. And some of the new things that we're really trying to bring in is, again, I think it really, for me, comes back to, hey, the world's changing so quickly that we're going to have to just come into this come into this world with the greatest skill sets we possibly can, and the mindset that change is coming at us at all times. And how do we leverage those skill sets to meet the current demand around change? And that's something that, as I look throughout the organization, I'm part of conversations and I'm hearing people of all levels of the conversation or of the organization. Truly, innovation is now part of it. And it's not identifiable in the same sort of Silicon Valley innovation style, but it's innovation on the level of trying to solve problems that we know exist, trying to grow the value to our clients, trying to look at what's going on in the landscape out there right now that we need to bring in or test incorporating into what we're doing on a daily basis. And that's the thing, the reason I'm so proud of that is because I really just feel like that's the future, right? Great skill as a foundation, then the willingness to look at change and saying, okay, how can we incorporate what's going on out there and grow the value for ourselves and for our clients? And that was something that I would say was not one of our strong suits 3, 4, 5 years ago. Because really in the VAR world, it's not a super imaginative kind of, you don't want people going out and being super innovative necessarily. Whereas what we think the reality around service delivery is that everybody at every level of the organization should be thinking about how they can innovate around service delivery, because they're so close to the action. They're the ones that are seeing what's working, and they're the ones that are seeing what's not working. And that's the level of innovation that I really love about this organization right now, is that people throughout are looking for ways that they can improve the delivery and the experience, both for themselves and for the clients. And like, that's gold from where I sit. So, it's also something that needs to be nurtured every day. It's a flash in the pan. It's a point in time. It's all those things. But I think as a general characteristic of our workforce and how we go about our work now, that's one that I'm really proud of. That's part of our culture. And again, we were able to leverage kind of this really strong group of people, huge skill sets, commitment to the business, and just turn it a few degrees and incorporate some other things. So that's how I'd answer the culture thing. With any ESOP you talk to, I think you get a cup of coffee and be ready for people to talk about their culture, because I think it's one of the things we're all super proud of in the ESOP world is really just this collective thing that we all have. We all try really hard to nurture.
Yeah. I do think that is unique and important, and I love how you're talking about kind of the willingness to embrace change and be open to new innovations as a skill set that kind of you and others in the organization have really helped foster. And really, in my experience, that's something that you want to have in all parts of the organization, right? So every role, every function in the business has a different purview, and
Hmm.
in times like this, as you say, where there's so much changing in the world around us, especially in technology, it's a really valuable skill set to have, and bigger valuable to have as part of your culture. I can share that, for our own business, marketing as a field is also, constantly changing, and a lot driven by technology. And I think about with generative AI and the launch of ChatGPT, and very quickly had to think about how I wanted to respond, how I wanted our firm to respond. And similarly, it was a change management component of really wanting to bring everyone on the team along for the ride, and with an endpoint
Hmm.
that we still don't know what that'll look like, right? Because we're still just at the very beginning of this.
Yeah, I think that I think of your industry specifically as one of the core, just a great example of what I was just talking about in terms of bringing this really robust skill set to the table, and then applying this like mindset of like, okay, it's different now. It's got these, but it's got these other components of how it's generated and that kind of thing. But without the really solid foundation that your people bring to the table, then ChatGPT is just ChatGPT. It's, about how it gets applied and people's willingness to say, I'm going to take this in as one of my skill sets, and I'm going to use this to amplify this thing that I'm already really good at. To me, that's the gold right there, and the thing that I think also is true about Gen AI, which is luckily, at least so far, it's a little bit like those change management books. Like we can all read the books, but how you apply it's really the question. I think Gen AI is that way for sure these days. It requires a really smart, capable human to really deliver, right? We're all sniffing out places where Gen AI is doing all the work and the humans aren't. Like to me, there's clearly the sweet spot where the human is bringing to bear their intelligence and the Gen AI is bringing to bear their capabilities, and boom, you got some magic there. But anyways, it's I could go on all day about that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I could as well. Maybe that'll be a future episode for us.
Great, sign me up.
Yeah. Um, but I do think, bringing it back to the organizational change, and even with something like that, with the example that you gave, is really looking at what is the vision that the leader sets forth, but then bringing enough, you know, openness and flexibility to let let the innovation unfold as it needs to. And similar to what you were talking about earlier in terms of the art and science, I think this is another area where there's kind of an art and science to everything. Um,
For sure.
and wanted to to shift gears a bit. You're talking about some of the things currently happening within systems engineering. Can you talk a little bit about what is the biggest challenge or priority that you're focused on at the moment?
Yeah, so I guess there are a couple of things, from a business perspective. I think obviously cybersecurity remains just a huge topic and something we spend a ton of time on. And there's a huge, I think, a gigantic AI component, both on the good side and the bad side there. But so cybersecurity will remain a huge priority for us. What we're really seeing also is just this, there's a huge demand growing around compliance within our customer base. And so like if you think about sort of the defense industrial base, sort of super high compliance industries like that, there's obvious compliance requirements that have IT implications. But it's also true across really most of our industries. If I look at wealth management, if I look at healthcare, legal, they all have more and more kind of compliance requirements that are coming down on them. And so for us, growing that ability, continuing to grow the ability around the advisory consultancy side, and specifically framework-based consultancy. So, we do a lot of work with CMMC. We do a lot of work with the NIST, CSF, and all the different frameworks. And they all sort of are very similar, and they apply a little bit differently to different industries. But that's been a huge area of growth for us. We feel like we have the ability to take these really sort of complex frameworks that can be suffocating if you do it the wrong way, and we implement them. We feel like part of our secret sauce is to be able to bring the best in class around compliance and frameworks to bear in an organization and operationally deploy those things in a way that allows you to still be super productive, super secure, and get everything done that you need to get done. And so that's an area where we're spending a ton of focus right now, is getting people up to speed, education internally around these different frameworks. What does it mean in terms of our daily day-to-day? And how do we square off to clients, and how do we give them advice around these compliance areas? So from a product perspective and kind of a business building perspective, that's something we've got a big focus on. I would say internally, back to that theme around we want to be here forever, the infinite company. And so we're really also focused on succession planning, which is really a systemic program. It's not something that only happens at the top in case somebody wins the lottery. It's really from the bottom to the top. How are we managing talent, and how are we nurturing leaders in these organizations? So that's something I'm really excited about. We're using a mix of internal and external resources to sort of create that succession planning program, but also in the meantime, deliver a lot of leadership training to some high potential folks. So really have a lot going on there, really trying to do our part as much as possible to give the employee owners everything they possibly can have to be successful. And so, yeah, those are the big areas of focus, I would say, for us right now. Again, like you, I could tell you, I could go on for days about other things we're working on, but big headliner, it's really compliance and consultancy, and then implementing that in a way that allows people to be productive on the product side. And then internally, really making sure that we're built for the long run.
Yeah, I'm sure even those two in and of themselves would keep you busy for a while. And perhaps some convergence between the two. I like how you had shared, the external perspective and the internal, because typically we do have the initiatives that go out to the outside world, typically, go to market related product development, enhancement, etc. And then the internal side of that, and where the two meet, is kind of a lot of this kind of work that we're talking about around kind of driving change and enabling the right skill sets. Can you tell me a little bit how you look at the team's development, and where you focus on development purely with internal resources, and when you bring outside support?
Yeah, so I think we sometimes have to fight our DIY sensibilities, and again, like everything, not abandon that, but also you got to know when you need external perspective and external kind of guidance, and I think that can be very difficult. And so for me, I think one of the things that we've been trying to do in our what is traditionally human resources, we call people and culture here at Systems Engineering. What we've been doing in a few cases is to get the guidance externally and to really bring in sort of consultants to help us establish something. So I'm thinking in this case about it's a assessment that we do for all leaders, and we're trying to bring that all through the entire organization, so people and their leaders and themselves and other people in the organization can start to develop a common language around some of this stuff. But the point is that we brought in a consultant for the leadership team. We went through this whole process. We really liked it. And then we got the head of, again, what's normally HR, people and culture for us, certified on doing this assessment and this whole entire delivery of this kind of assessment. And so now it's an internal function, and one that we are pretty sure that we're going to be with for a few years. On the other hand, we have whole entire functions of areas where we have no expertise. So I'm going to use the ESOP kind of administrative side as an example. And we have entire parts of our ESOP administration that are outsourced to third parties, because that's either of such high consequence or such dynamic nature, it's changing so much, or such a unique kind of skill set that we're never really going to bring some of those subtleties on board. And so our best bet is to find a partner. And I'll use another example that's near and dear to hopefully to you and I, Natalie, which is when we feel like we have a great skill set internally, and I'll use the example around marketing for us, and we feel like we could use some external help to leverage that skill set to bring in a broader perspective of what's going on in the market, bring in some new ideas. And so we partnered, obviously, this is not this paid spot. I don't think Natalie knew I was going to say this, but we partnered with Magnitude. And this is a great example where, again, we love our people. We love the talent that we have in that department, and we want to grow it. And we want to bring in some external experts to help maybe adjust our perspective and to grow our skill set there. So yeah, look, I don't have a great answer for you other than I think, again, when the time is right. And if you can find a good partner, that's a huge part of it as well.
Yeah. I think that you touched on an important point, that, the DIY versus bringing in outside expertise. And I think, like many things, there's no one size fits all. And it's really about looking at the organization and thinking about, what got you here won't get you there kind of thinking. And when
Right.
is that, outside perspective. I think, as you were talking about your own journey, I was thinking about an example in our business. A few years ago, we implemented EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and
Mhm.
it did drive some changes and things that we needed to do differently and behave differently and run our meetings differently. And looking at how to bring that first to the leadership team. How does that get rolled out across the business? But I think the team started to view it as an investment in them. So I think similarly to how you're talking about, when we started working together on the marketing front, um, showing kind of your marketing lead, that you're bringing more support for her and other brains to work on something, collaboratively and together. I think that can help the team see that, whether it's outside support or leadership development, it's an investment in your people, and to ultimately help make their world better.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think, we all want to get an A every time we go try to do something. And I think you also got to give yourself a little bit of room and say, if you if you try to do the right thing and bring in an external partner and it fails, and I'm not a huge fan of that word, because you learn something, and that's not a failure in and of itself. But if it doesn't work out and it turns out that wasn't a great partner, or it wasn't a great decision, or the timing wasn't right, it's okay. You learned something, and I think the worst thing you can do is nothing. And you got to acknowledge, I think, that there's a significant failure rate when you try to go strike these professional relationships. And it doesn't mean that they're not a great company or you're not a great company, but it probably means that fit wasn't right. And so there's something to learn there. But I would say, I think I'm now getting comfortable with the reality that if I get 2 out of 3 partnerships that work out great, then that's better than average. And I should be pretty happy with that. And I shouldn't beat myself up too badly if I spend a lot of time and energy and commit to bringing something in, it doesn't work. It's like, okay, what do we have to learn from that? And then how do we apply that going forward? But I just think we all got to give ourselves a little bit of grace there and say that we're not going to get 100 every time. And the real failure is doing nothing. And so, yeah, go figure out what part of your business you need to maybe get another perspective on and give it a shot.
I think, it would be great if we could bat, 10 for 10 every time we brought in a new partner, but
Right.
unfortunately, It doesn't always work like that. I think going back to the discussion we had about culture, making sure there's a good cultural alignment, right? There's the things that everyone sees, right? The expectation setting and the skill set and alignment on industry and all of that. But ultimately, especially in professional services, it's people on both sides of the equation, and so making sure that there's a good alignment and kind of mindset and cultural fit and all of that as well. Matt, I wanted to shift gears a bit. I've already learned a ton from this conversation and from all of the wisdom that you've imparted. I wanted to dig in a bit more into you. So, who is Matt McGrath? If you can tell me, maybe how did you get from little Matt in your childhood to where you are today?
All right. Well, I don't know. I'll skip over the uninteresting parts, or I'll try to at least keep them brief. So, look, I'm youngest of five kids. I grew up mostly in Brewer, Maine, so small town in the middle of Maine. And I would say I look back on the nights I spent around the dinner table with four older brothers and sisters who were super strong personalities, um, and just look back on that as kind of the most important part of my life. Really formative. So from there, went to college in Massachusetts. Ended up in graduate school. I was an undergrad Spanish major, so not exactly the traditional path that to start you on your way to becoming a CEO on the IT side. So I was a high school Spanish teacher for a while, long enough to know that I loved the job, but literally couldn't pay my bills. And so I moved back to Boston where all my friends were. And I leveraged my teaching background to get a job teaching software. And so I was able to travel all over the world teaching this different software that was hot at the time. And then ultimately that led to a role up here in Portland, Maine at a company called Right Express. And I was there for 15 years. I was able again to travel internationally and do a lot of different fun stuff, but saw a lot in that experience that really I think was super formative for me. And I'm very grateful for my time I spent at Right Express. Had a lot of great opportunity and was able to just, again, see some of these situations that really prepare you for kind of a life like the one I'm living now. And so while I wasn't in this industry before I came to systems engineering, I've been in IT since 1999 and in different capacities, but really have been kind of on the leadership side since about '09 or 2010. And then came here in 2013, and we've just had a really fun time. It's been something I did not see coming, but it's just been a really great part of my life and my career. And I love the people, I love the place, and I love the industry we're in. It's just a really, really good time to be here at systems engineering, I think.
I would agree. I would agree, Matt. As I'm hearing you talk about your background, it sounds like two common threads are teaching and communication, right? And from different languages, but then translating IT into business talk, which is critical and critically important for a lot of the kinds of businesses that you work with. And then I think the teaching and education theme cuts across a lot of what we've been talking about is how do you develop new skill sets, how do you learn how you learn, how do you help bring the team and different personalities, people with different strengths along through a journey like that.
Yeah, I would say probably maybe my biggest advantage in this role is that I'm not really a technologist. I'm more of a consumer of technology than a maker of technology, and I think it's beneficial to at times have that perspective as a consumer of it as opposed to a creator of it, and allows you to really, I think, separate yourself and put yourself a little bit more maybe in the shoes of your clients and also of your employees. So I take that what I think is probably ultimately a weakness, and but for me it's something that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think, like many things, strengths and weaknesses can be two sides of the same coin. And looking at, you know, how do you ask certain questions a certain way by not maybe having grown up in technology, but having spent, it sounds like 25 years or so in technology. And presumably some of the audiences and clients that you serve fall into a similar camp such as yourself. I'm curious, Matt, is there anything that people would say is surprising about you?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't talk to people about me very often. Uh, question. Well, I spend a lot of time, um, doing crafts with my 11-year-old daughter who just turned 11 yesterday. So, like for example, this past weekend I was doing a lot of weaving and other like diorama stuff, which she's relentless about. So maybe that. Yeah, I don't know. I think no, I don't think there's a lot that surprises people about me. That's a good question though.
That's good. No, that means what you see is what you get. Though hadn't pictured you weaving on the weekends with your daughter, so I love that. I too have a daughter that loves crafts. I think the biggest difference is I also love craft, so I can suck her into activities just as much as she can do for me. My last question for you, Matt, is really, what advice would you give your younger self in your first ever leadership role?
Wow. So, all right. So 29-year-old Matt, I still was living a very different life. I had no kids. I have 4 kids now. Um, I think the biggest thing that I would, if I could sit myself down, that person, I think the biggest thing I would probably say is to try to be a little bit more true to yourself when you know something is either right or wrong. Be willing to kind of unemotionally state your point, state your perspective. I think there were a lot of times I look back on my early career and I think it probably helped me, but I don't think it was necessarily the right thing to do, which was to sort of get along and just go along to get along. And I think that again, it sort of in the moment, it can serve you well. I don't think I necessarily contributed what I could have or should have to some of those situations. So I think, we, in some parts of our culture broadly, we're led to believe that disagreement has to be sort of a dramatic thing. It's got to be a big statement. And I think as you get older, you realize that's not true, right? You can really disagree with somebody or state your point in a way that's really additive to the discussion. And that's something that I think I would have probably suggested to myself that I do a little bit more deliberately. Something that, it's hard to have that confidence when you're getting started, I think, on that journey. And by the way, at that point, you have no idea that you're on a journey, right? You just took a job. Like, hey, sure, I'll do that. A little bit more money, a lot more responsibility. Okay, let's see what happens. So I think, let's not forget, we don't know a lot of times we're on that journey. At least I didn't. But yeah, trust your gut and be willing to respectfully state your point, even if it's contrary to the prevailing thought in the room. You might learn a lot quickly, or the other people in the room might learn a lot quickly. One of the things I love about the leadership team we have in place right now is I witness every day this sort of freedom that we all feel to say things that could be totally uninformed, could be totally wrong, but they come from the gut. And that trust that exists within that group right now is something that I really, really covet. And I just love that we have that. And I'm really trying to protect it because it allows us to be our best selves and say things that could be silly or totally wrong. But, often, obviously, those are the things that lead to good outcomes or to advancement. So, yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of good stuff in what you just shared there. I like the point about not knowing you're on a journey. It's as you were talking, it made me think, what journey are we all on now that we don't realize yet? Though I do think the further we all get in our careers, the more foresight we have, and we realize kind of where we are versus maybe where we're headed or where the opportunity is or what are the different paths to take. So I think there's certainly a lot there. And before we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you to connect or to learn more about systems engineering, can you please tell the audience how they can reach you?
Yeah. So I guess the if you want to get in touch with me specifically, I think probably the easiest way, if we don't already know each other, LinkedIn, just invite a connection, create a connection on LinkedIn is probably how I'm most easily accessible. But also for us, systems engineering, if you're interested in kind of talking to us potentially about doing work together, our website's loaded with all of our information, and you can contact us directly through there. And, I think in general, we put ourselves out there quite a bit. We have a lot of different lunch and learns and kind of thought leadership activities, whether they're webinars or in-person events. And I would just say signing up for one of those doesn't make you a prospect. It just makes you an interested party, and certainly would invite anyone who likes the content we're putting out to just join. Really, we're trying to do it as a way to be, again, additive to what people are trying to get done in their business. If it turns out we can be good partners to each other, that's great. But really, first and foremost, we're just trying to be good partners to the community and to this region. And so part of that is about information delivery. And so feel free to opt in. We'd love to have your voice at some of those things. But yeah, those are the best ways to get in touch with me. Thanks for the option to put that out there, Natalie.
That's great. That's great, Matt. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on here and talking transformation with me. I loved hearing about how you first started educating yourself in your business life ahead of undertaking the transition from VAR to MSP. I love talking about how you've collaborated with and helped to develop your team and what you're all building together. And I know you really do have a phenomenal team and culture. And I think what you've shared today hopefully has really helped the audience gain some new learnings and insights as they think about their own business. So to those of you listening, if you learned something, and I know everyone did, please share this episode with someone that you think would benefit. Maybe be sure to share what you learned as part of it, or adding in your own advice and expertise. Be a good citizen of the community, as Matt was just talking about. And that's really, how we all get better at leading our businesses and driving transformation. So thanks again, Matt. And thank you, everyone. This has been another great episode of Shift and Thrive, and see you next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.